artificial, and I found were absolutely natural, maybe unusual natural formations, but natural. You can get patterns in nature also.
So how do the Bahamas rate on the Atlantis checklist? The underwater rocks are probably natural, not man-made structures destroyed by a catastrophe. There is no firm evidence of a catastrophic event pre-Plato around 9,000 years BC. And there is no evidence of circular canals, red, black and white buildings, bull sacrifices, or elephants. If Atlantis ever existed, it almost certainly wasn't here. Despite Greg and Laura's passion, this lead has also proved wanting. So, could the next location offer more hope? In 2000, a team of scientists searching the seabed off Cuba made an intriguing discovery. Deep below the waves, they found huge structures that may have been the work of an ancient civilization. Many people have claimed that they have found the site of the mythical lost city of Atlantis. Those claims are being put to the test. The search has led to the Mediterranean Sea and then to the Bahamas, diving amongst some unusual but unremarkable underwater formations. Now the investigation comes to the island of Cuba. In deep waters off the Cuban coast are other mysterious structures, which appear at first sight much harder to explain. Marine engineer Paulina Zalitsky and her husband Paul Weinswag worked together surveying the oceans of the world. Atlantis was the last thing on their minds when they set off to search the seabed in December 2001. They had been hired by the Cuban government to search for sunken galleons containing treasure from the Spanish colonies. The seabed is 2,000 feet deep, too deep to scuba dive. So they survey the area with side-scan sonar, a device that uses sound waves to produce images of the sea floor. They don't find Spanish galleons, but they do find something unexpected.
We saw a huge submarine, very large submarine. We don't know whose submarine, but it was right there in area on ocean bottom.
They had stumbled upon modern military activity in progress. But their encounter was brief. The submarine moved away before it could be identified. But a little later, their side-scan sonar lights up with another startling image.
The graphics had symmetry and geometry and architecture to it, things that did not look natural.
The structures looked man-made, almost like something out of a James Bond film.
We decided that it's probably something related to submarines. Maybe it is a world underwater submarine terminal, you know, very large, really large one, like international airport.
They take the data back to their laboratory for analysis. For months, Zalitsky plows through the scientific literature, trying to find an explanation for what they have found.
Every day, I studied for 6-8 hours. 6 months later, I lifted my face to the wall, and there was this Mayan calendar.
The Mayan building on the calendar appears to match the images on the side-scan sonar. To her, the underwater formation has a similar layout to ancient Mayan cities in Central America. Could the objects be man-made? Curious to learn more, Weinswag and Zalitsky sail back to the site. This time, they send down a submersible camera. The images they capture are highly unusual. There are regular-shaped rocks, some of them forming structures almost 150 feet high, and they stretch over an area of 8 square miles. These artists' impressions based on the side-scan sonar reveal what the structures might look like. They appear man-made, but geologist Robert Schoch is not so sure.
What some people see is pyramids, maybe other types of buildings, maybe some kind of regular pattern suggesting some kind of urban layout, maybe if you want to call it a city. Very interesting, very intriguing, but is it definitive? I don't think so.
What concerns Schoch is that most ancient ruins lie at depths of less than 100 feet. No one has ever seen anything this deep.
To have structures under 2,000 feet of water and to suggest that they're artificial, you have to explain that somehow. Could they be artificial? Conceivably, yes, if there was some kind of tectonic activity, maybe a catastrophe like Plato describes that caused them to sink so deep. But still, this is something that really needs to be investigated.
If there was a violent event that caused the land here to sink, no one knows what it was. But from circumstantial evidence he has collected, Paul Weinswag thinks the structures could once have stood on an island.
When our consulting geologist went out with us, he showed us the outlines of an existing island that had sunk.
Could the structures at the bottom of the sea have once looked like this? According to Weinswag, a story uncannily similar to the Atlantis tale appears in the oral legends of the Yucatan province of Mexico. It describes the origins of the native people.
These origins were traced to an island that sank to the east of Mexico in a great cataclysm.
In one night.
In a single night. And this island had been peopled by a tall white race that had seeded the advanced forms of culture, architecture, astronomy, agricultural science, and so on.
So is there any possibility that this is Plato's Atlantis? How does the Cuban site fare on the Atlantis checklist? If the structures are man-made, then they must have been sunk by a catastrophe. But there is no indication of when that was, or any sign of red, black and white rocks. And hardly surprisingly, there is no evidence of canals, bull worship or elephants. It's an intriguing site, and science still has a lot of work to do in Cuba's deep sea. But is this Atlantis? Probably not.
I'm not convinced that they're artificial, much less Atlantis. But do I leave the possibility open? Yes. It deserves a lot more investigation.
Weinswag and Zalitsky have already planned their next expedition, with manned submersibles and vastly improved lighting and photographic equipment. They hope that next time they will bring back conclusive proof of a great ancient civilization that once thrived in the Caribbean. Having had little success here, this search heads back once more across the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. The last candidate, and perhaps the strongest contender for Atlantis, is an island that lies close to ancient Greece. Here, one of the most sophisticated cities ever to have arisen in the ancient world was blown to smithereens in one of the worst natural disasters in human history. Perhaps this is, once and for all, the origin of the legend of Atlantis. The trail of Plato's lost city of Atlantis moves on. Explorers and fanatics have claimed dozens of sites to be the remains of the lost civilization. But probably the best candidate of all is the Greek island of Santorini. Here in 1967, archaeologists sensationally discovered a beautifully preserved ancient city buried deep below the earth. They quickly established that it belonged to an advanced civilization, the Minoans, based on the nearby island of Crete. Famous for their magnificent palaces and beautiful frescoes, the Minoans controlled a vast empire long before the rise of classical